I would like to praise God the Father and His Son Jesus Christ for allowing us to be here this Sabbath day. Indeed, it's a joy. Today we have Jacob Cable from British Columbia, Canada, to give us his journey to find the one true God and His Son Jesus Christ. Brother Jacob, may God blessing be with you as you share your testimony.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
So I've grown up in BC, British Columbia, for most of my life. I grew up in a really rural area. Different kind of lifestyle for sure. My dad came from the US, and my mom came from the eastern side of Canada. My dad, he was raised in a Christian family, I think Lutheran family. And my grandpa wanted him to be a pastor. And he didn't want any part of it. But anyway, he kind of seemed like he wanted to just get away from people. So he left and he came to Canada, and he sold his car and he bought a horse and tried to get as far away as he could. He ended up meeting my mom, and they had bought a little piece of property and raised a family. They had 6 kids, one of them, and like I said, we lived a really rural lifestyle. We didn't have power until I was in my teenage years. No TV, not even a phone, but it was a really good type of lifestyle. Growing up, it was peaceful. Not a lot of trouble. It was actually a really, really good lifestyle. I had a lot of freedom as a child. Not a lot of rules. I heard about, my parents taught us about God, but they were never really like, we never went to church. We never prayed it a lot. So it was kind of something, like, out of my siblings, I think I'm the only one that really believes. And but growing up as a kid, I remember always just feeling like someone else was with me, and like I would be alone. I would be, playing out in the woods somewhere, and I could always feel the presence of somebody with me. I never ever felt alone. And I remember on my 12th birthday, there might have been 10th, 11th, I can't remember. That's when I started praying for the first time. I don't know why I did, but I just started praying. And then I decided every single night from then on, I would pray. And I have ever since. And so we ended up, when I grew up to about when I was about 17, I ended up leaving home, went to a different province for work, and kind of regretted it after I left, because life was pretty hard compared to what I thought it was going to be. It was way harder being on my own, and it was just a really harsh, kind of a cruel world compared to what I was used to. Like people were a lot different than what I was used to being around, and I never seemed to fit in. Like I just always felt like the outcast wherever I went, and it seemed like as I was growing up, I started just trying to fit in, wanting to fit in more with people, like wanting to be more like other people when I should have been just happy with who I was. I was trying to be like other people, and I ended up getting into partying and just my life. But I could always feel God like directing me. Like it was like God was on one shoulder and the devil on the other, kind of like I would be aware of things that I was doing, and I would just say no, no, and I would argue with it and ignore it, and I would say, well, it's just normal. Like you can clearly see it's normal in the world to live this type of way, so I'm just going to ignore that because I don't want to be a weirdo, and so I just started drifting farther and farther away from God. But I always prayed every night, and ended up in this town in Alberta, and I started getting lots of friends there who I thought were friends, and a girlfriend whom and I was single a lot of the time too. And I was always trying to make things happen on my own. Like I should have just waited, and God would have found me the right person to be with. But I always had to make things happen on my own. I did things by myself without God. And I started like doing drugs, partying, bodybuilding, just really became worldly. I started to have a lot of pride in myself, and I just really wasn't going the way that God wanted my life to go. I know that now. I got addicted to opiates really badly. They're like doctor prescribed painkillers. I was working on drilling rigs, and I'd work such crazy long hours. My back would be really sore. I would be just fatigued. I'd work like 3 days with no sleep as a service hand. And I got introduced to those through one of my friends. I took some of them, and I just felt great. But the whole time when I was living that kind of life, I just felt like this emptiness inside me. Like it was, and I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if there's some kind of drug that I could take that would get rid of that feeling. Alcohol, I didn't really like that much because I hated the way it made me feel the next day. So anyway, when I found this opiate, I liked the feeling. It numbed all my feelings. It numbed all my pain, and it numbed my conscience. Was a big thing too. I had no conscience either when I take it, and but I didn't know it was really horribly addictive. Like opiates are derived from heroin. It's basically a legal heroin is what it is, and the government has full control over it. They prescribe it in a lot of people that they shouldn't. With me, it was never prescribed to me. I found it through somebody else. But so my life, just from kind of that point onward, just kind of started falling apart. I started to realize that I was addicted to it. I was doing all kinds of other bad stuff too. But I would get deathly sick when I would stop taking it, and I wouldn't barely even be able to function at all. So it was a really horrible trap that I was in, and I really couldn't see much way around out of it. And it got finally to the point where my fiance at the time left me. And when that happened, my life just spiraled like downward really, really harshly. I was just a mess. And I think I remember praying foolishly that God would just end my life. And the craziest thing happened that very night when I said that prayer, that night I was driving this little car. It was a Volkswagen Jetta TDI diesel, and I was taking the car somewhere. I was going to do something that wasn't good, and I knew it wasn't good, but I was going to do it anyway. And I went around a corner. I had no seatbelt on. I was going about 160 kilometers an hour, which is probably about 100 miles an hour, maybe even 110 miles an hour, somewhere around there, I think. And going around a corner and then in the forest, and all of a sudden the car went turn coming around the corner. That's all I remember, the car not turning, and I was going too fast, and I was yanking at the steering wheel, and it wouldn't turn. And all I remember is just launching off the highway through the trees and in the forest, and it was airborne. And I remember thinking to myself that, wow, like I'm gonna die. And I remember thinking to myself, but I'm not ready yet. I don't want to die. I'm not ready yet. And then I remembered my prayer, and I just remember feeling a whole bunch of regret. Instantly, I was knocked out, unconscious. The car just started hitting trees, and I feel the impact, like just jarring me into the trees. And when I woke up, I had like severe pain in my back, and I couldn't move. I was jammed into the floor of the car, and the rest of the car was busted over top of me. And I was trapped in the car. It was just me and my dog. My dog was in the back seat, but basically the car had went through about probably 250 feet of forest. Finally, it hit a huge stump, and it endoed forward, and then hit a huge tree, and it like smashed the roof right flat on it, so flat that it pushed the dash right off, and it crushed me right into the floor. But the reason I lived is because I didn't have my seatbelt on. And when I started hitting the trees, I think I jammed myself into the floor, and the rest of the car got folded over top of me. And so I was pinned in this car. It was October in Alberta, so it was freezing out. And I was in there for about 8 hours in this car. And the whole time I was in there, I was praying and screaming and asking God to help me out of there. And I couldn't find my phone. It was somewhere I could hear it buzzing. People tried to call me, but I could hear it buzzing in there. But I couldn't even get out of the car or move in the car. And anyway, after about 8 hours, this strange thing happened to me. I felt like I was starting to die. I went into like this really peaceful kind of feeling. And I don't remember exactly what happened, but I seem to remember having like a conversation with somebody. It was really strange, but whatever it was, I remember it was really, really peaceful, and it was a really good feeling. And then all of a sudden, I don't know how long that was, that went away. And all of a sudden I strongly remember that I just knew I was going to get out of this car. And I don't know why. I just knew I was getting out. And it was like God told me I was going to get out. I'm not sure what happened that time. It was the strangest thing, but within 5 minutes I got out of the car, and I managed to get out. Other people couldn't believe that I got out of the car, but I got out of the car and I made it to the highway. Somebody picked me up on the highway. I was covered in blood. They took me to the closest town. I went to the hospital, got out. I remember the next day or a day or two after, my friend, he was a drug dealer, saying to me, he said, Jake, he said, you talk about believing in God. You talk about God sometimes. He's like, I've always thought you were crazy. He's like, he never believed. He said, I've never believed, but he said, after seeing what happened to you last night and you lived, he said, I think that's a sign from God. He said, you shouldn't be, because I was planning on going back to finish doing what I had originally went to do. Like at first I was really I was thankful that I lived, but I soon forgot that, and all the people that were telling me, like, wow, they couldn't believe that I survived. It went to my head, and I ended up taking credit for something God had done. And my friend even told me that. I think it was God speaking through him. He even told me that, but I didn't listen to him. And that very next days, I went back and I was driving my truck, and I ended up about a kilometer away from the spot that I was in before. And I was directly going against God, I think, because a kilometer or so from that same spot where I crashed earlier, I hit a thick patch of fog. I just remember it was really thick fog. And I looked up and there was a car in front of me. And I remember my last thoughts thinking, like, I pray nobody's in that car, because I had no time to react. It was just right in front of me. It was thick fog. I collided with the corner of that car with my truck, ended up flipping my truck. When I woke up, my face was cut wide open on my cheek, and a native guy was kicking me in the face, and all my stuff that was in the back of the truck was on the highway. Cars were hitting it. It was tire was snapped off the truck. I hit my head so hard that I kept falling down and fainting on the ground. The ambulance ended up getting there, took me to the hospital, and I could hear screaming in the background when that happened. And ended up in the hospital, and there was a young person in that vehicle that I found out the next day had died from the car accident. And at that point, I thought my life was tough before that happened, but my life just got way tougher from that point onward. Basically, I owed a life at that point, and I ended up in a hospital trying to get help with counseling with the anxiety and the guilt that I felt and the addiction at the same time. And the cops had called me when I was in the hospital, and they said they wanted to talk to me when I got out of the hospital. And I said, okay. They said, come see us when you're out. I was in there for a month. And when I got out of the hospital, I went to my closest town, and the cops, they arrested me and charged me with dangerous driving causing death and 6 counts of dangerous driving causing bodily harm. And I had court dates I had to go to. I got released on probation. I ended up getting, one of my conditions was not to drive. I ended up getting caught driving. So I went basically from there to jail. And it was really tough dealing with all of that. But the next couple of years of my life was really, really hard, dealing with this kind of stuff. I ended up having to pay for a lawyer, dealt with all the charges, ended up going to jail for a little while, for a few months in there. Had people try to kill me in jail. The whole time I was in these kind of situations, I would pray to God, and I would ask him to help. And there was some times when God would be my only help. Like, I would have nobody else around me. Everybody kind of had, really, be honest with you, given up on me, my family. Kind of wanted not a lot to do with me. And but God would always be there. And even when I was sinning really badly, he but anyway, I got to a point where I was ready to take my own life, and called my older brother and asked him to give me a chance. And he took me in. And he said, Jake, if you're gonna come here, he said, you're gonna do things my way, though. He said, you're not gonna have people over. You're not gonna go anywhere. He said, you're not gonna do any drugs. He said, you're gonna get clean. And I said, that's what I want. I said, I really want that. I don't want to live the life that I've been living. And I said, that's what I've wanted for a while. And so I went to his place, and I suffered for a while there, for about a month or so. And I couldn't really do much. I was pretty helpless for a while. And I ended up getting a job, getting clean from opiates. And for the first time in a few years. And things were a lot better. It was a really tough time. But I managed to change my life around through God's help. But I still would end up getting on the wrong track. Like, this whole time I would try to search for God, and I tried going to other churches, and because I knew that God was the answer. I knew that was what I needed. And I don't know how many different little churches I tried attending. Like, they were all Sunday churches. And so I would go to a church, and I wanted to learn about God. And I was really interested in the end time message. I just really, something strongly convicted me that we're in the last days. I felt convicted of it. I would read Revelation. I didn't understand Revelation, but I'd read it. And it just seemed really interesting to me, that the last day thing. I felt like we were in the last days. And these other churches, I would try to talk to them about it, and they didn't want to talk about it. They just figured it. They would say, no one knows the day or the hour, and basically it doesn't matter. And there just was, it just didn't feel sincere either when I went in those churches. People were just, they would greet you when you come in, put on a nice smile, and, oh, hey, how's it going? And then after the church was done, you would see them, and they would just ignore you. And it was like that in all the different churches I went to. People were just really worldly, and they would look down on people like me, and think they were better than me. And I could just feel it. I could sense it. And I tried going to different churches and searching for truth. And I searched the internet. And anyway, one time I ended up coming across, and I would try reading about what different people thought about the end times. And it just seemed like nothing was convicting until I ended up finding endtimesprophecy.org. They're a website in the UK, and I read about the Sabbath. And when I read about the Sabbath, I was just really strongly convicted. Like, it wasn't something where I had to have to reread twice. And it was like God was speaking right to me. It was just, I was intensified, like reading it. I was just, wow. I read the whole thing and thinking to myself, wow, this makes really sense. Couldn't figure out how everyone else didn't know this. Like, it was just super obvious to me. And so then I started wanting to find a Seventh-day church. And I remember reading something about the Seventh-day Adventist church. So it's basically only two churches that were Seventh-day Adventists. There was Seventh-day Adventists and the United Church of God. I wanted to join the Seventh-day Adventist church or start attending. I never really got around to attending for a couple of years after. My life still would go into some spirals sometimes. I straightened my life out a lot. I ended up moving back to BC, but I'd still drink sometimes. Had a lot of loneliness inside of me still. And sometimes I would go out, end up drinking. And it was like the devil was trying hard to take my life. I wasn't addicted to opiates, but I would go out, I would drink, I would get into cocaine after drinking a bunch. And then when you stop taking the cocaine, it gives you get horrible anxiety. Like, you just feel a really strong separation from God. And I would end up getting into the opiates at that point again, even though I wouldn't go back to that when I was sober. So I ended up overdosing one time. They found me under my truck, the middle of an intersection in town. My heart was stopped. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. They said I was pronounced dead on the scene. And my truck was in neutral. I was underneath of it. And that ended up happening about three different times. And I won't get into too much detail with that, but I know it was God kept me here. I shouldn't have lived. Like, one of those times would have been a miracle, but for there to be about 3 or 4 of those times, it was just a miracle. One night when I was praying, and one thing I believe is, if you really hit a rock bottom part in your life and you're praying and you sincerely asking God for your help, I'm sure that he answers you. But to be able to pray like that, being actually sincere and actually really meaning it, that's something that's not in our control a lot of the times. But this one time I prayed like that. And I told God, I said, I want to change. I don't want to be like this. I said, please guide me. Help me to find a partner that's like me. Right after that, I ended up meeting Emily and talking to her. And from that day onward, I never drank again. or did drugs again. The crazy thing about Emily is when we were kids, she had 3 brothers. I didn't grow up with Emily, but she had 3 brothers. And they were about my age, and they were my best friends when I was a kid. We grew up so far away from everything that you didn't have a lot of friends, like just family. But they ended up dying when they were, one was 7, one was 5, and one was about 10. The dad went off the road into a lake. The road was muddy. He slid off the corner. He was a cowboy. He worked at a ranch next to where we lived, and he went off the road into a lake, and they all drowned. And my parents, I didn't know what happened to them, and until a few more years, my parents told me what happened. But her mom and dad ended up divorced. As you can imagine, there'd be a lot of blame for that one. Anyway, I met Emily when she was little, like she was a baby. I'm a couple years older, about 8 years older than her. So I met her when I was a kid. Never, that family moved away. Never seen them for 23 years after. And then ended up meeting Emily at that time. But that whole journey in my life, all the bad that I went through, just ended up, it never had to happen. That all happened from my doing, and not living and following God's will, trying to do things on my own. I could have had a good life that whole time if I would have just chose to listen to God and do his will. He would have put me with Emily when she was the right age, and I'm sure my life would have been a lot great. But I remember praying the whole time when I was going through those hard times in jail and just really tough times, asking God to change the circumstances for me. But a lot of the times God didn't answer. And I know why he didn't answer, because it was necessary for me to go through those kind of afflictions in order for me to change my life around, to lose my sense of pride in myself, to increase my faith in God, and to lose my fear of death and fear of man, and take away a lot of my fears, and but mostly to humble me. And it really changed my life. I remember with Emily, on my birthday, it was on 2018, she asked me what I wanted to do on my birthday, and I said I want to go to attend the Seventh-day Adventist church in town. And she said, okay. So we all went to the church, left the kids with my mom, and it was great. The service was great. The pastor, he had kind of like a similar, he talked about his past, and he had a similar past as me. And I felt convicted, like this is the right place at that time. And we had new friends there at the church in town where we moved. And so we started attending every Sabbath from that point onward. And we were only in the church for maybe about a year. We were baptized into the church. At our baptism, they gave us some Bibles, and they gave us some a great somebody gave us a great controversy book. Somebody gave us another book from the church. It was a Seventh-day Adventist written book. It went through basically, I forget the name of it. I think I got rid of it. But anyway, I read the Great Controversy first, and I was really interested because the Seventh-day Adventists actually talked about the end times, but they never really taught it in the church much. Like, I was kind of disappointed that in the church it wasn't even spoken of. But you could find these other writings of Ellen White. You could find stuff about the end times, because I felt like it was important. If we're in this time, Jesus says it'll come upon us like a thief, and we need to watch for it. We're sure we're not going to know the day or the hour, but we need to be ready to meet him. And he gives us a general idea when it is. So I was really amazed when I read Ellen White's writings and the prophecies. And there's so many different winds of doctrine about prophecies out there that it really is confusing. Like, but I didn't realize that a lot of the end time events in Revelation had already been fulfilled. So when I read the Great Controversy and understood, about a lot of those events had already been fulfilled. I didn't even know about the destruction of Jerusalem being fulfilled, the Dark Ages, the papacy. So I was really amazed. I read all this stuff, and then I started reading that other Seventh-day Adventist book, and it got in. And Ellen White had said that before we read, we should pray. So I would do that every time I would read. I would pray and ask God to lead me in all truth. I got to the part of that other book when it got into the Godhead, and it started talking about God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. I made it as far as God the Holy Spirit, and I actually never ever read that part, because when I got into that, what would happen at that same time, the pastor would only be at the church every third week, and he would go to other small little towns in the meantime. So we would watch like a YouTube video in there at the time, Doug Batchelor stuff. Sometimes I would find something in Doug Batchelor and I would share it and watch it. So anyway, I found an end times prophecy video, and I shared it with one of the elders, and I said, we could watch this on Sabbath. And he replied back, and he said, do you know who this website is? And I said, no, but I said, it seems like they're in the truth. Like, that's how I got led into Seventh Adventism, is from that website. And he wanted to talk to me at the church after church. So I talked to him at church, and he told me that they were anti-Trinitarian. I didn't even know what Trinitarian was. I'd always believed that Jesus was the literal Son of God. And so I listened to him at first, and I thought, and he said, you really got to watch what you find on the internet. He said, so I listened to him for about 2 weeks, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to pay much attention to that. But something just was convicting me to look into it. And I would think to myself, why would they speak against? Because that was one of the things he said. He said they speak against the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I thought to myself, why would they speak against the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Like, why would anyone just, want to go talk bad about somebody else without any reason? So I started looking into it, and with an open mind. And as I was looking into it, I would pray. And I really wanted to know the truth, whatever it was. I said, God, please show me the truth. I said, I don't want to be deceived. I said, whatever it is, just show me, and I will accept whatever you show me. And I would look into it, and I would look at both sides. I would look at some of their Bible verses that they would use to argue the Trinity, and I would study them, and I would think, okay, well, when I read this, it would, this kind of shows a little bit that there's might be a Trinity. And then I would read the whole thing, and I would be like, no, this is not right. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, no, there's no way I believe this. Like, this is not true. So we just stopped going to the church. We didn't even know that there was other people out there in the world like us. We tried going to the United Church of God once, went in there, and they had the truth about the Sabbath. But again, it was like the other churches. I just didn't feel the presence of God there. Like it was just weird. We were still eating meat at that time. One of the weird things was I could smell the coffee just strongly on their breaths when I was in there, because everybody was drinking coffee, and we went to, they had like kind of a meal and a meeting after. And the weird thing was I could still smell the coffee on the breath of the pastor when he was talking to me. And you know how people get hyped up when they have caffeine? It was like that, and it just didn't feel pure to me. And so we stopped going to that. We ended up just getting a lot of Ellen White's writings and fellowship, and having a Sabbath at home, and trying to do God's will, and get away from things that we felt God wanted us to do. Like we stopped eating meat and caffeine, and been just trying to be right when God finds it, when God returns to this earth here, and do his will. And we've joined other little meetings and stuff, and we ended up learning that there's a whole group of people out there in this world, like tons of people that are like us, that have come out of the church. And every day we pray that God guides us. And at this point in my life is better now than it's ever been before. Like we've started the small business doing automotive repair. So I have freedom from jobs, from work, from bad bosses, from rules at work. A real free life right now. We have 5 kids. And we live a really blessed life right now. Like, and God will sustains us. Like we're not rich by any means, but God just helps us get by all the time. We just learn to rely on God. Like the money that we have we just always have enough. Sometimes we'll be waiting on invoices to get paid, and we'll kind of lose hope. But I think God wants us to live like that, because we put our trust in God and not in ourselves. And Satan will always try to dangle a carrot in front of our face and say, you can have the world if you follow me. But we just have to stay true to God, and look to God, and not to ourselves. That's my biggest lesson that I've learned in my journey is look to God and not in ourselves. So that pretty much sums up, I think, my testimony. So I hope you guys enjoyed